Blog Talk Radio.
Franchise interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews. Welcome to Franchise Interviews, an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at franchising and entrepreneurship. Listen to interviews with franchisors, franchisees, franchise authors, franchise experts, and attorneys. And now, welcome your host, Marty McDermott, and Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the Franchpreneurs of all. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and we have a great show today. Well, we're meeting with Nellie Akalp. Nellie is the CEO and co-founder of CorpNet, a trusted resource and service provider for business incorporation, LLC filings, and corporate compliance services. We'll talk to Nellie about that in just a moment on Franchise Interviews. So stick around because we have a great show.
Are you one of those special people who are willing to go after your dreams and goals? Are you ready to fulfill that dream of owning your own business with the security of a proven brand? The opportunity to take control of your future and own a Rita's Italian Ice franchise is within your reach.
Rita's is seeking success-oriented individuals who are ready to make a change in their life, and Rita's offers unparalleled training and support to assure your success. And did you know the frozen treat industry is a recession-proof industry?
Now here's the really good part. Rita's Italian Ice is a unique and amazing taste treat. It's smoother than a snow cone, and it combines ice with real fresh fruit. The real fruit adds dramatically to the taste, and it comes in over 40 flavors. The ice and fruit are mixed on site and made fresh daily, and it is delicious.
You'll want to know more about this exciting and successful franchise opportunity. Go to www.ownaritas.com and get all your questions answered. That's www.ownaritas.com to take control of your dreams and future today. You don't want to wait any longer to be a part of this adventure. www.ownaritas.com.
Hi, this is Connie McDermott, Administrative Assistant for Franchise Interviews, LLC, and you're listening to Franchise Interviews.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very special edition of Franchise Interviews, where for over 15 years now, we've been asking the Franchpreneurs of all. I'm your host, Marty McDermott. I'm the president of Franchise Interviews, and as we were saying earlier, we have a great show today. Well, we're meeting with Nellie Akalp, and Nellie is the CEO and co-founder of CorpNet, a trusted resource and service provider for business incorporation, LLC filings, and corporate compliance services. Hi, Nellie. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Marty. Great to be on the show. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Nellie. It's great to finally have you on the show. You know, I've been following you for some time now, whether it's on LinkedIn and Twitter, so it's a privilege for me to finally get the chance to speak to you in person today.
Well, thank you so much. The privilege is all mine, and I'm on the show, and really, really get to be another form of resource to your audience, franchisors, and franchisees.
You have such an amazing story, Nellie. I mean, I thought, maybe we can kind of go back to the beginning. I mean, you can go back as far as you like, but, I guess, for me, when I'm like reading your story, it's very impressive. I mean, how and why did you become an entrepreneur? And I guess it could apply to your husband, too, because I think you were both in the same place, weren't you?
Yes. I think entrepreneurship is something I was truly born with. And, I never really did well with being boxed in.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
I come from a I'm an only child. I was always kind of one of those children who played with myself. Being an only child, had to really, really occupy and really, make myself kind of busy. And through life and growing up, I just always was kind of on my own. And with that, you kind of get to be a survivor and go through life kind of, doing things on your own. So the idea of having to have a boss or having to work on somebody else's time or clock really wasn't something that excited me and motivated me. And not that, there's anything wrong with that. Some people do really well with that. But for me, it just wasn't something that I was getting excited about. So I felt like entrepreneurship would be the best route for me.
And so it sounds like, you went to law school, Nellie, you and your husband, and then, the story gets even better. We didn't talk about it in the beginning of the show, but, you started the company with very limited money. And then at some point, I guess, Intuit came into the picture. I guess it was in around 2005, and they purchased the company, didn't they?
Yeah. So my old company, we started it with $100 out of our two-bedroom apartment. Yeah, we started it with $100 out of our two-bedroom apartment, and we were at the time both going to law school, and then we grew the business to where it was doing nearly, about $900 to $1 million in gross sales per month, and then we were approached by Intuit in 2005, and initially it was one of those kind of meetups where we were told this is going to be a partnership, et cetera, but then soon the conversation turned to one of acquisition, and we were blessed enough to be acquired for a large sum of cash. And it was an easy transaction because, there wasn't really any investors. We didn't have any debt. It was just Phil and I. So it was a very clear-cut transaction, and we were acquired. And initially we thought, okay, this is fun, we'll stay on. But then soon it really, the company kind of lost its entrepreneurial spirit. For us, happens. And God bless corporate America, but that's just not my gig. And we decided to step down and took some time off, focus on our then growing children. We had 3 at the time, and now I have 4. But at the time we had 3. Thank you so much. And our non-compete ran out, and 3 years later, fast forward to 2009. Phil and I realized we were too young, and we were too bored and too passionate, and, really, really didn't want to, become retired at the age of 35. And so we decided to start our current company, CorpNet.com, and I'm really excited and proud of where CorpNet has come to. And, we just had our holiday party with our entire team this last Saturday night, and I have to tell you, it was so surreal for me seeing, over 150 people at our company gig. And it's such a great feeling to be able to touch so many lives and help so many employees. And it was just a really exciting event for me. And I have to say I'm really proud of my team and my company and from where it started to where it is today.
It's interesting, though, because you had a lot of choices. If you go back to the beginning, when you and your husband wanted to do this again or, start your own business, what was it about CorpNet? What was the catalyst for you starting CorpNet? Because, again, you had all these different choices. So there was something about it, that particular industry or that business that you loved. Maybe you can kind of go back to that time, what you were thinking.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's an amazing question, and I love to answer that. It's really because when we were coined as the pioneers of the industry. When we first started with our initial company, there was just a few players out there, and we came in and we made the process of starting a business, owning a business, getting your, business documents, kind of streamlined. We streamlined the process, and we kind of came out with this idea and mantra that anyone can start a business. We really believe anyone can start a business, and truly the reason why they don't is that there's this lack of awareness that legal documents and filing of legal documents must be filed by attorneys. So having gone to law school and really learning the process, we wanted to come out and educate entrepreneurs and including franchisors, franchisees, that you don't need an attorney to set up a corporation or LLC in any state. In fact, save that money and use it towards getting an attorney when your business really needed. So we streamlined the process. Fast forward, after we got acquired, we were coined as the pioneers of the industry. And then, after we sold to Intuit, we were under a non-compete, and we couldn't do anything for 3 years. But after that non-compete, took its course and expired, we decided that really what makes us really passionate is this idea of coming back into the industry, and now having had all this experience under our belt, creating something bigger, better, stronger, even more streamlined. And frankly, there wasn't really anyone out there, even with all the competitors now in 2009, when we came back and re-entered the industry, doing it the way we envisioned. So simply stated, it's the only thing I know how to do really good, and I love it. I don't call my job a job. It's really what I love doing each and every day. And when you love what you do each and every day, when you're passionate about it, it's not a job, and that's what really makes me excited about my career, my job, and specifically CorpNet.
Maybe you could talk a little bit, Nellie, because I think, a lot of times, like you were saying, that most maybe aspiring entrepreneurs, maybe they get a little intimidated by, like terms like whether it's sole proprietorship or partnership or S Corp or LLC. Maybe, you can talk a little bit about like the different types of like business entities for our listeners, just in case they're a little bit intimidated by that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are many different types of business entities out there. And to kind of give you a simple business refresher course, a sole proprietorship is really a business owner, one business owner, hence why the name is sole. It's basically a business owner starting to provide services and accepting money, accepting consideration for the provision of those services. And by default, when you start receiving income for the services that you're providing, you're really coined by default a sole proprietor, because you're accepting money as income for the services that you're providing. And with a sole proprietorship, it's really one person doing business for profit, and you're simply by default coined a sole proprietor unless you want to do business under a different name or a fictitious business name. And in that regard, you would go down to your county recorder's office, file a DBA, also known as a fictitious business name filing, so that, for example, John Doe is doing business as John's Consulting Services. With a sole proprietorship, there is no legal protection. There is no asset protection. There is no liability protection. There is no corporate shield. And hence, God forbid you end up on the wrong end of a lawsuit, they can come after you as the business owner personally, and they can come after your house, your savings account, your retirement account, anything and everything you own. Similarly, with a partnership, which is basically the same thing as a sole prop, but it's really two people doing business together. And with a partnership, even gets scarier. In my opinion, it's the scariest. Why? It's because you're married to that individual, literally, even though you're not husband and wife, perhaps, but you're married. So anything that person does, you're going to be liable for. So with a sole prop and a partnership, there is no liability protection. There is no asset protection. It's basically, you as a business owner, or you and your partner as business owners are exposed. In that case, that's why we really, really encourage people to consider taking their business to the next level and putting it in some form of a legal business entity, such as a corporation or an LLC. Now, with a corporation, it's the most formal type of legal structure. With a corporation, now what you're doing as a business owner is you're separating yourself from the you're separating yourself as an individual from the business, because now as a corporation, it's a separate legal entity, and you're creating this bubble around yourself as a business owner, because now as the owner of the corporation, you're really called the shareholder of that corporation. And, as a corporation, what you're creating is this bubble so that, God forbid, if the corporation gets sued, as long as the corporation is being complied with and conducted properly, they cannot come after you as the business owner of the corporation personally. So hence, main benefit of incorporating a business would be that you're protected from any type of personal liability. You have asset protection. You have liability protection. You also have this sense of increased, kind of like people are going to look at you as more of an established business entity, because there's more credibility. Sure. And they're going to look at you and go, okay, wow, this business has taken the necessary steps to establish themselves, and they're more likely to want to do business with you. And lastly, it's easier to set up and start, building business credit. And in many cases, you're, eligible for more tax deductions as you would be otherwise with a sole prop or a partnership. So that's corporation in a nutshell. There's various different types of corporations. You can become a professional corporation if you're a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. With a corporation, you can, if the shareholders of the corporation qualify, they can qualify to become a subchapter S corporation, which is really an C corporation, but you're making an election with the IRS for the IRS to treat that C corporation as an S corporation for tax purposes and treat that corporation as a pass-through tax entity. You can have a closed corporation. So many variations of it that for purposes of this particular, version of the podcast I can't go into, but maybe we can do one just on corporations later on. And then there's the LLC. The LLC stands for the limited liability company. Right. And with an LLC, it's really the way I look at that entity is you get to have the best of both worlds. You get to have all the benefits of liability and asset protection that often is associated with a corporation, whether a C Corp or an S Corp, but without all the corporate formalities. Because really what an LLC is it's a hybrid of a sole prop partnership and a corporation. So it takes all the, asset protection, all the good stuff from a corporation, but without all the formalities that really one has to abide by in running a business as a corporation or an LLC. And, if you go to the CorpNet.com website, you can go to the resources area, and I have literally hundreds of thousands of podcasts on the different types of business entities. And you can go ahead and, do a little bit of a, educational, kind of version on which entity is good for you. And, if you don't have the time for that, we also have a wizard that has been created by attorneys and accountants that, takes you through a series of questions, and then based on the answers you provide can, suggest which type of business entity would be best for your business. So lots of great resources out there for the franchise or franchisee.
It's a great lesson for our listeners, Nellie. It kind of makes you wonder why, somebody would consider, after listening to, why someone would want to become a sole proprietor or a partnership, like you said. It just seems so risky in today's world, and the majority of our listeners, Nellie, we call them aspiring franchipreneurs. Most of them have it in their mind that they want to get into franchising, but there's so many different industries, as you know, in the franchise arena. Should all is probably a powerful word, but should anyone considering buying a franchise, would they ever consider like doing it as a sole proprietorship or partnership, or should they? It sounds to me like they should always consider something like an LLC to me in listening to you.
Well, it's interesting you ask that because we actually have a franchise expert that works within our company. Her name is Amanda Barron. And for those of you who are franchisors or who have become a franchisee, most franchisors will require the franchisee to become some sort of a legal entity. From my understanding, most of them will require you to either go C Corp, S Corp, or LLC. And as in becoming a franchise, there are other legal documentation that a franchisee needs to also comply with. So from our understanding and the hundreds of thousands of franchisors and franchisees that we're assisting, we're seeing that typically most of them do not opt for a sole prop or partnership. In fact, I don't even think they can. So we have a great franchise formation team that can be, at your service and assist you with everything you need, whether you're basically a franchisor starting a franchise or a franchisee who is starting a franchise, And we can assist you with all of the documents in any of the states. And in addition to that, once the franchise is set up, we can also assist with keeping that franchise, whether a corporation or LLC, in compliance, and even help with expanding as well. So let's say, you're a franchisor and you get a franchisee who comes in, we can assist the franchisee, but let's say now the franchisee has employees. We can also set up all the payroll accounts, all the tax accounts. So we're a one-stop shop when it comes to anything and everything that franchisor or franchisor needs to not only start that franchise, but to also maintain that franchise as it goes through the business cycle of growing.
How did COVID play a role with CorpNet, Nellie? I mean, for you or for your clients, I mean, how did it impact the business?
It's funny you ask that because unfortunately, I know that a lot of businesses, as a result of COVID, got affected very negatively. For us, it was a huge blessing for the fact that we, obviously it was very, very scary in the beginning because we're all sitting there going, what are we going to do? And for us, because of the fact that most of the majority of businesses went remote, businesses started realizing that not only they can be remote, but now they have access so much more employees and so much more talent in multiple states and in other states. So as a result, the remote aspect of creating this remote environment for businesses to go remote created a huge new market for us, whereby now we were able to not only start new businesses for people who were perhaps fired or furloughed or laid off from the business that was going out of business, but also they plan, this was their bigger blessing in that they decided to go into business for themselves. So here we are starting businesses. And then for the other businesses that, knock on wood, remained in business, they realized that they could be expanding in multiple states, and we started assisting them with employer setup of tax accounts, payroll accounts. So COVID for me and for our company has been a really, really big blessing. I tend to look at everything in a way where, everything happens for a reason. God has us where he has us for a specific purpose. And so, I tend to look at the silver lining behind what's happening. And for us, COVID, brought a lot of blessings to us as a business and as a company.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting that you say that, Nellie, because, in doing the show, last year, I mean, of course, COVID, it became a theme of the show. It was hard to not do a show without talking about COVID. I remember when I was interviewing, I think it was Huntington Learning Center, and they're like kind of like a tutoring franchise. They're always like brick and mortar. But when COVID came, I mean, they were forced to go remote. But that kind of forced them to realize that they said, you know what, this is an opportunity because their customers actually liked them being remote because they didn't have to go to the physical location. And then the tutors could educate from their own home, So it's interesting how some businesses were able to pivot, like your example, and see it as an opportunity. It's interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it's very interesting. And, it's just, for me, I kind of take look at it from the standpoint of, we tend to look at it like, everything happens for a reason. Yes. And, this is one of the things that I often, I often implore and encourage my employees to look at is when something happens, immediately don't go to the negative, which as a human, as humans, we are so, programmed to be like, oh my God, it's doomsday, it's doomsday, yes. But for me, and I'm not, I'm very, very prone to going that route as well,
Sure.
Because that's how our brains are programmed as humans. However, when you take a moment, when you take a moment to just kind of step back and go, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. What does this really mean for us? There's something that happens where you kind of look at it and go, okay, you know what? Maybe this is exactly where I'm supposed to be, because for us, the business was kind of at a standstill whereby we were kind of plateauing and we were not going down, but we weren't going up, and we were kind of growing at a rate where it was just kind of that normal rate. But once COVID took place, like we went from a 15% company to a 70-plus person company.
Wow.
And
Incredible.
It just took a little bit of our leadership team kind of getting together, putting our minds together and going, okay, let's step back and let's look at really what this is as far as the opportunities that are associated with it. So, I mean, I would, as a, from one business owner to another, I would definitely implore, although it's very, 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 very hard to do so, to, if you can, I would encourage you to kind of step back and see if there's any blessings that are kind of underneath whatever it is that, is going on for you at that moment.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I see, like, sometimes on the internet, Nellie, like, or, if even when you pick up, the entrepreneur magazines and things like that, a lot of times they'll say, incorporate in a particular state. What state should, let's say, like an expanding franchise register in? Or, I mean, do you get involved in that as far as, like, advising? Are there other states that they should consider, when it comes to things like incorporation? Like, how does that work?
Sure. So, generally speaking, for a franchisor or franchisee, so if you are, if you have a business and you want to franchise it as a franchisor, again, we don't provide legal, tax, or financial advice. What we can encourage you to consider based on what the states recommend is that, generally speaking, the rule of thumb is to incorporate within the home state where the corporate headquarters are located, where the principals of that franchise are located, where the majority of the employees are located, because setting up the franchise in a state other than the home state is potentially going to allude to double taxes, double state laws, and the list goes on. So typically the rule of thumb is to incorporate where the business is located. And then as you expand and have nexus in others, can foreign qualify to do business in those other states. But the corporate headquarters of the state should typically be set up in the state where the majority of the business is taking place, whether you're a franchisor or you are now becoming a franchisee.
That's interesting. What advice, Nellie, would you give to our listeners? I mean, you've been very successful in entrepreneurship, and I was mentioning to you earlier, the majority of our listeners, they're in the early stages of looking to buy a franchise. I mean, from everything that you've learned about entrepreneurship up to this point, what advice would you give to our listeners in their quest to buy a franchise?
First and foremost, don't do it for the money, because
that's good. Right.
For me as an entrepreneur, when I've often kind of, just kind of, when I'm grinding and I'm grinding because I'm doing it for the money, it's always a flop for me.
Yeah.
So I would say whatever it is that you're going to, put your heart in or set your mind to, do it because you're passionate about it and you believe in the product or service. Because when you believe in the product or service, then everything else kind of just trickles down and flows. So that's my foremost recommendation. Next after that, I would say, as an entrepreneur, you're going to fail. And rather looking at that failure as kind of like, letting it take over your mind and body, my suggestion is to lean into that discomfort, because as entrepreneurs, you're going to fail. And failure is just part of the learning process. Failure is part of the process of being an entrepreneur. And for me, failures are kind of the pathway to success. So as an entrepreneur, you're going to fail, as I am, and I'm not done failing. I'll probably fail 100,000 more times.
Sure.
And as an entrepreneur, I get up every day and I listen to that inner voice and I listen to my heart. Sometimes, I have to remind myself that, I am capable of doing amazing things, but before I can be capable of doing those amazing things, I have to make sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm passionate about and I believe in it. So that's really where it starts.
It's great advice, Nellie. I once heard, I was listening to an interview with Fran Tarkenton, quarterback, and he became an entrepreneur. And he said something like, my greatest successes happened after my biggest failures, and it's interesting that you talk about failure, because, I've been doing the show 15 years now, and I don't think that's ever really even come up, 15 years, but it makes a lot of sense that you say that, is that you have to anticipate that, there are going to be failures, and you're going to have to learn from them and continue to move on. I think that's very powerful, isn't it?
Yes. And for me, every one of my successes was because of a failure. Even with CorpNet company, we did so many things that, when I look back at it, I look at it and I go, okay, well, that was really something that was kind of, how could I have done that? But I look at it and I go, had I not done it, I wouldn't learn. I wouldn't have learned from it, and I wouldn't be where I am today. So I'm a huge believer of leaning into the discomfort. I really, really love Brené Brown. I read a lot of her books, and one of the things she talks about in her book, Braving the Wilderness, is braving, and how she kind of starts her day, and with the acronym BRAVING, with B being, having boundaries as a business owner, as a leader, reliability, the R, having that, reliability where you do what you say and say what you do, accountability, vault, being a vault, and, not only, asking people to maintain your confidentiality, but, likewise making sure they're being a vault for you. And, integrity, making sure you have integrity without compromise, and not compromising your integrity. And, having this non-judgment type of mindset where, you're not judging people, and also being able to say whatever is on your mind, knowing that you're not going to be judged for it. And then generosity, which is my favorite one, in that whatever happens, and whatever happens to you is like, don't assume the worst, be generous about it and think like, okay, let's step back and really, assume the best, or kind of like question it as to why this is going on. And even when it's about someone talking about you or someone doing something, let's not assume the worst. Let's kind of look at it for what it is. So that's kind of how I live my life, with this kind of mentality of bravery and braving, and because if we're not braving the wilderness, then what are we doing, really? I mean,
right.
In this world, everybody is going to tell you no. Everybody's going to tell you not to do things, and
right.
If you want to take that route, then where's the growth for you as an entrepreneur? So, yeah. So,
wow.
So thank you so much.
It's powerful, Nellie. Yeah, it is really powerful. So if you could look into the future, Nellie, 3 years, 5 years down the road, where do you see CorpNet?
Oh, wow. So I tend to focus on today and the present and take it one day at a time. However, I see CorpNet as growing and truly, becoming, we are really in a place and a position whereby we are on plan to take over 22 when it comes to the industry as a result of, our seamless software and the software that we are creating as a company. Right. So I would just say bigger, better, stronger.
That's great. It's a great response, Nellie. What's the best way, Nellie, for our listeners to get more information on CorpNet and all the different services that you provide? Are there any websites you want to direct them to?
Well, thank you so much. Yes, for any of you interested in either starting a franchise or if you're becoming a franchisee, I would highly encourage you to visit CorpNet at www.corpnet.com. That's CORP, N as in Nancy, ET.com. You can also feel free to pick up the phone and call us at 888-449-2638. Our franchise expert at CorpNet is Amanda Barron. That's Amanda Barron. She can be reached at extension 105 or simply you can email her to Barron, that's A as in Apple, Barron, B as in boy, EREN as in Nancy at corpnet.com. And she is our franchise filings expert and literally is a world of knowledge. I call her a walking encyclopedia.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed talking to you, Nellie, and I'd like to invite you back, in 6 months or a year down the road, because I still have 100 more questions.
Love that. I would love that.
I'm so glad I finally got to speak to you today. Yeah, because I feel like I know you, and following you on the social media circuit, so it was a privilege and honor for me to finally get the chance to speak to you today.
Likewise. Thank you again, Marty, and I look forward to it, and best of luck to you. Happy holidays to all of you.
Thank you. Happy holidays to you too,
all
Nellie.
Be filled with abundance, blessings, everything, and definitely will circle back in the next few months with you. Take care.
That's true. Take care, Nellie. We'll be right back with more franchise interviews. Coming up on segment 2, you're going to hear what every franchipreneur needs to know before buying a franchise. We're going to play a clip from our popular Great Quotes in Franchising podcast right here on Franchise Interviews. Hi everyone, this is Marty McDermott from Franchise Interviews, and welcome to another edition of Great Quotes in Franchising, where each podcast you get to hear a great quote in franchising. We've been hosting Franchise Interviews now over 8 years and over 400 shows, and during that time we've had some incredible quotes on our show. Today you're going to get to hear from Chris Simic, who is the founder of FranchiseTeacher.com, and Chris has over 30 years of business and franchise experience as an independent business owner, a franchisee, and a franchisor. And Chris said something very profound that we haven't heard on our show in over 8 years. He mentioned that you have to almost work harder to fail at franchising than to succeed in franchising, and he explains why.
Most people, about 90% I think I've seen, buy a business other than they first looked at.
Wow, that's amazing.
So
it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, that's a big number too, isn't it, Chris? Most people, they go in with these certain expectations and they come out with something different, and I find that fascinating.
I absolutely, it never ceases to astound me, but I think that speaks to the value of franchising as a business model and a business method, because people don't have to be in something just because they know it. And quite candidly, sometimes getting involved in a business that you would rather do that you were not involved in allows you the luxury of taking a new career path and to develop something you never would have had the opportunity to had it not been, systematized and prioritized for you. In franchising, it's said that you have to really almost work harder to fail than to succeed, because if you have a good franchise system, if you follow directions, you have to almost purposely not follow them to not do well.
That's true. That's fantastic. We have this great quote in franchising. I think we're going to put that one in there, Chris. I think that's very original, and it's very true. What advice would you give to our listeners? We find that most of them, they're just beginning their search to buy a franchise, Chris, and we find that, most of them just simply, they don't even know where to begin, like you were saying. What advice would you give to them?
I do, when I speak to people looking at franchise, I give them three different pieces of advice. One, make sure you're looking for a business for the right reason. A lot of people have things happen in their life. They lose a job or something happens, and they react and maybe say, well, okay, maybe I'll go buy a business. That may not be the reason to do it versus having the luxurious selectivity that here's my opportunity that was created by some adversity. Second thing is that they have to make sure that they are able to be franchisees, that not everybody is designed to be able to follow the systems, procedures, and the processes it takes to be a successful franchise owner. And then I tell them quite candidly is pick a couple of the industries and the price ranges that may have interest to you, and then kind of pin down from there, either using the resources of a consultant or a broker or a team member, or on their own. Either way, but I think that if they take their time, follow the steps, and do it for the right reasons, they'll be on a much smoother pathway to success in owning their own business.
That's well said. What's in the future then for Franchise Teacher, Chris? I mean, where do you see the company 3 to 5 years down the road?
Well, Marty, we've been extremely fortunate and blessed that the business has been around, through Century Franchise Group for many years, and our new FranchiseTeacher.com has taken off. We're representing right now, 7+ brands. I think in 5 years, our focus will really be even more fine-tuned as the consumer or the prospective business owner is looking for more and more specific information. Breaking down to teach, coach, consult, and advise, I think will be a way for us to assist people in what they need. People, again, don't know what they don't know, but I think the information overload sometimes discourages people too early. They say, this is too much for me to process. But we can break it down into bite-sized pieces. I think more and more people, especially the younger generation, who are looking for the advice and the information they want when they want it, I think is going to do nothing more than continue. Then our next business venture, which launches at the end of this year, is looking to capture all the different franchise brands around the world and put them into one place. So we're looking forward to a future. And franchising is going nowhere but growing. As you said for a long time too, the number of franchise opportunities, and the world's getting to be a smaller place. I think you're going to find a lot of opportunities coming in and going out of different marketplaces in different countries, accessible to more people.
That's fantastic. What's the best way, Chris, for our listeners to get more information on FranchiseTeacher.com? Obviously, FranchiseTeacher.com, but any numbers you'd like them to call or email addresses?
Well, actually, we appreciate www.franchiseteacher.com. And my business partner, Dave, and I offer them the free 1-hour consultation. Fill out the form and take advantage of it.
That's fantastic. I want to thank you again, Chris, for finally coming on the show. I've been following your career for a long time now, and I have just been very impressed with everything that you've done, So when I saw this, I mentioned to you, we don't typically call people to come on the show, but I had to have you specifically on the show. So it was an honor and a privilege to have you on the show today.
Marty, ditto, and again, congratulations on your PhD doctorate. I have read your thesis, and I would recommend it reading if people can get through the information.
I really appreciate that you read it, too, because that's an honor coming from you. So that's fantastic. Well, I want to thank you again, Chris.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Franchise Interviews. From Easton, Pennsylvania to Sydney, Australia, you're listening to Franchise Interviews. Franchise Interviews.